I will talk about violent inclusiveness, and the title might sound a little bit strange, but hopefully by the end of my talk, you can understand why I chose that title. And this is a paper in progress, so it's not finished yet. So any feedback is welcome. No, it doesn't want to switch. That's not nice. Okay. I can't switch my slides. Okay, here we go. That took a long time. I want you first to know a little bit more about the context. So I did research. This is data from my PhD actually, and it's about a company that decided to take or get access to the so-called ethnic food market. And this is just a picture from one of the big communities of ethnic Turks living in Germany. And there are around about, for this company, 3.5 million potential customers just in Germany. They're also active in other European countries. And they produce, but they also sell food products that are directly targeting ethnic minority groups, especially Near East and especially the Turkish group. But a little bit about the market before we start, or the whole community as such. The food market, the ethnic food market in Germany is primarily actually built upon ethnic minority entrepreneurship. That means that when, for example, Turks moved to or migrated to Germany, they opened their own supermarkets, they opened their own little shops in order to cater for their own tastes and their own people. And the important part to understand already here now is that actually it is kind of like a low barrier in terms of educational backgrounds and qualifications that are needed in order to open such supermarkets. Of course, you are embedded within the legal system within Germany, but actually it provides jobs for people who don't have to have an education as such. They don't have to have a business education, for example. And most of the jobs are actually taken within the extended family. So it's extended family members that then at some point in time decide, so now I can start maybe selling some products here at my cousin's supermarket. So that's where I have some income. And the reason why ethnic minority Turks actually are kind of like pushed into this corner has to do with the legal frameworks in Germany, for example, and also in other European countries. Which actually leave them no other chance than going that way. On top of that comes the devaluation of skills and education. So even though you might have a business background from Turkey, it's not seen as having the same qualifications than if you would have one from Germany. So there is a lot of discursive and structural discrimination within the German field of business, you could say, and within Germany as such, which makes people taking on these jobs and producing, taking on this job. So what I'm actually do is I did an empirical case study back in 2014 to 2016, so longitudinal, and I did participant observation both at the headquarters of the organization, but also at the sales subsidiaries. And for this speech, for this paper, I just look into the German market. Semi-structured interviews, informal conversations, a lot of informal conversations actually. And the key actors within this context are ethnic Danes in the headquarters here in Denmark. There's there was at least one, at some time there was one ethnic Turk working, but he also left the company in Denmark quite fast again. And then it's primarily Turks in sales in Germany, in Austria, and all the other places they actually have sales subsidiaries. And that was a strategic reason, because they wanted to cater to the ethnic minority market. And that's why they needed some understanding of how do ethnic Turks actually use the food products. They also need an understanding how does the market actually work, because it was quite new to them. In general, when I entered the field, I got the impression that actually the company is quite inclusive to ethnic minority Turks, but that was mainly only in the sales subsidiaries. So when I entered the company, I also had this idea of maybe at some point in time, they will actually hire some ethnic Turks also into the headquarters, or at least have some ethnic minority Turks running the sales subsidiaries, but that actually never happened. And at headquarters, it's mainly homogeneous white males in their 40s who work with sales, who work with management, and they all have more or less the same educational backgrounds, which is from the business context, and it's a Danish business context. So what can we say a little bit more about the market? Well, it's a little bit old, the data, but and I don't know how to pronounce the name, but Valerie, he says like, okay, so ethic entrepreneurship is characterized by family-oriented, now I can't read what he's telling me. Can I move this? Yes, sorry. By family-oriented, but also extremely competitive, hardworking people, and it's providing jobs with low barriers. We already have that, and with low education qualifications to people. So family orientation also means that in this case, business and family is overlapping. So very often I saw family members coming to the sales subsidiaries. Sometimes the kids would be there. So it was kind of like an overlapping of business and family. And the Danish workplaces, they are quite different. And when looking into some description of that, kind of like a stereotypical maybe description you will find on the internet, is about that Danish workplaces are egalitarian, and they're open-minded and trust-based, and especially in relation, what's important in relation to my research is that so management is kind of like portrayed as offering work-life balance. It's empowering, and normally management will show recognition and sincere interest in each employee, and actually would also work with fair promotion procedures. So that's how, for example, study in Denmark from 2019 describes Danish workplaces. Yeah, the company mainly worked with the retail market actually in Denmark to start with, so kind of like Fakta and Netto and Superbrusen and you name it. But since there was such a big potential customer group in other European countries, they expanded, and especially to the ethnic minority groups. So
can I just say
yeah?
There is some noise. I'm not sure why.
Oh,
but,
okay. I know why. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I hope now it's better. So from that perspective, it seems that actually the Danish company used this idea, which we know from diversity management, kind of like utilizing differences. So they needed to have access to this culture, to the cultural capital of the ethnic minority Turks in order to understand that market, in order to gain new customers, and also to understand the rules of the game. So how do you actually do business? How do you do sales within the ethnic market? Because it was new to them. So that's also why they then hired primarily ethnic minority Turks. And this was also voiced by the interviewees. For example, Jesper, so these are also what's it called? Yeah, it's not the real names. So he's an intermediary leader, means that he would move back and forth between headquarters and the subsidiaries quite often. So he said, like, I think having Turkish employees is the key ingredient, meaning for the success they have right now. And it has been a long process because we eventually had the philosophy that we could sell our products ourselves since we knew them best. And that's true. Of course, they know their products best, but they don't actually know how customers would react to that. And to some extent, that's correct. But if you really want to succeed, then you have to have somebody who understands the language and understands the culture, understands the food culture, understands how our products are used. Somebody to whom these things have become second nature. And thus employing Turks seemed obvious to us. So here you have the rationale for employing ethnic Turks in their sales subsidiaries. So building the bridge between a kind of like Danish understanding of the retail market to understanding of the ethnic minority markets in Germany, Austria, and so on. And the same rationale is also what Yusuf came with when I asked, so why does he think the company is so successful? And he would say, like, I'm certain that having different cultures is part of the economic success. Our cultural background is important for the company's success. Our target group is mainly Turkish. I am Turkish and I can handle them. A Dane is less suited or not at all. We always position Turks between headquarters and consumers. In that sense, we take on key positions. So Yusuf clearly voiced here that he actually has a key position, or actually all ethnic Turkish minority salespeople would have a key position within the company. So they are important. They understand themselves to be important. They are the link actually for the company to have success in the market in the first place. So they're interdependent on each other. But when then I spent more time in the field, I would also hear other voices. So from the quote we just heard, or the two quotes, we could think like, okay, these are key people. The knowledge is important. The knowledge they bring from the ethnic food market to headquarters is very important. But it actually turned out to be not that important. And here's the reason why. So for example, in relation to marketing, how to market the products best, the ethnic minority Turks had a certain idea of how to do that because they always had been working with sales even prior to engaging with that company. And they knew how this was done, and they grew up in this environment. So they exactly knew, at least that's what they say, how this should be done, and that's why they have been hired. But the marketing manager says, like, in the past, we asked our Turkish key account managers how to market the products best, that is. And if one of them came with a certain input, then the other said, that is wrong. But actually, from a professional point of view, yes, we need to know what Turkish customers think about a new product and how they experience it from their point of view. Well, yes, that's something we can check off the list because we have done that together with our Turkish office. So they have a Turkish office which looks into how to best broadcast ads and in which channels and so on, and how to do the marketing. But of course, you, meaning hypothetically referring to one of the ESAC, that's what the company is called, ethnic Turkish employees. So, but of course, if you have not been heard, well, that may be bad, but seen from a professional perspective, what is it actually that they can support us with? In fact, we have launched products which are now very successful. If we had listened to them, this would never have happened. So from the point of view of the marketing manager, it's not really, it's a waste of time to listen to the ethnic minority salespeople and key account managers because they can't agree on how best to target the market. And that's why they use the Turkish office, as he says. And on top of that, I didn't highlight it here, but twice he says like it's a professional. So from a professional point of view and a professional point of view, this goes a little bit back to the idea of that you actually don't have to have a real high educational standard from being a salesperson or maybe even running a wholesale in the ethnic Turkish market. So are they really professional? Is this what happens on the ethnic market, food market? Is this professional sales? So it seems more kind of like the professionalism comes from the Danish side. And since the company is quite successful, so maybe their way of doing things is right. So from there, I will go on telling you I would just take one example of the many examples I found to show you how to give you some ideas of how this could have happened. So Yusuf, who we just already listened to earlier, who thinks he's a key person, he asked several times for promotions and he never got promotion. And so he told me, we will never move on. We salespeople will always stay salespeople, and that's it. And then he gives a reason for why that is. He says, it seems to be, yes, they make their career. They means ethnic Danes taking on leadership positions also in the subsidiaries. They make their career. They make their path on top of us. We are the stepstones. They step on us, move one step further, step on us, move one step further. And my suggestions are not heard, or are heard and then presented as their own. It is if my work isn't honored. So Yusuf has actually an education, has a bachelor in economics from a German university. Unfortunately, his parents got sick and he had to take care of them. And that's why he couldn't continue doing the master's. That's how he told me. So he started in sales because that was available for him. Also, as we already know from the very beginning, kind of like the educational backgrounds are devalued. And this might even be the case for somebody who has an ethnic Turkish background, but taking education in Germany. So even there it might be devalued. So he had no chance, as one could say, but taking on this sales job. And he never got out of this sales job. And he never was promoted, even though he came with a lot of suggestions on what to do, on how to actually gain economic success for the company. But as we already also just saw, this knowledge was not really, nobody wanted to listen to that. So actually he really was stuck there. And at some point he left the company. So is this then a paradox? Somehow the company says they do need the knowledge, it's very important, but then they try to find the knowledge somewhere else. So somehow they give this impression, or headquarters gives this impression that they actually do empower, but on the other hand, they don't. The people, or the Turkish salespeople, they feel stuck. So they're not really accepted, and the knowledge is not accepted. So to make sense of that, oh, I didn't even want to start.
5 minutes. Approximately.
5 minutes. Good. Yeah, to make sense of that, I take this from the TCM perspective, which is the critical cross-cultural management perspective. And within that perspective, scholars draw on Bourdieuian framework. For example, Tatley and Erspilgen do that. But here we'll mainly focus on the concepts of intersectionality and power. And since most of you know Bourdieu, I will not go into depth with that to also show you what I think has happened there. So intersectionality, I think most of you know that. I don't have to talk about that. Inequality regimes, I guess also most of you know that, but just to be sure. So it's these loosely interrelated practices and processes that maintain actually inequalities in relation to class, gender, racial inequalities, but in this case, actually an intersection of inequalities. So with Yusuf, at the end of the day, I find that it's actually inequalities in relation to not only ethnic background, but also the understanding of his educational background. So, but we'll come to that. What's also important is just from the beginning, we saw like people already are discriminated against in the ethnic minority markets in Germany. So inequality regimes, they also travel. So they travel, for example, from the ethnic minority market into the Danish company. And I will not go into depth with this at all. I would just say a little bit about the main issue or the main concept from Bourdieu I want to highlight right now in this paper, and that's the concept of power. Power are internalized limitations of agency. That means that when you grow up in a certain society, you don't feel that you actually have this limitation, but they are embodied in you. So, for example, I would never think of, I don't know, just closing down here now and leaving. So that's a limitation just given within this community we are in, or in my role I am in, and this is internalized, being yeah, a researcher or yeah, my work at Aalborg University. And it's internalized, and it's kind of like it's hidden, it's naturalized. So it's a natural way of doing things which people are not longer aware of. And that makes it very difficult to actually see the hidden power issues. But they become visible through symbolic violence. That means that people who have the power to decide what meaning is correct and what is not correct, what is the right reality. And in this company, this reality is produced by headquarters, and it is produced in different ways. So for example, why Yusuf got stuck. So one reality that is produced is through communication. The company, for example, arranged a sales course where for all ethnic minority Turks, in order to let them know how sales is understood from a Danish perspective. And the people had, and the salespersons were forced, kind of like forced to take over this perspective, even though they said the Western way doesn't work in our place. They were kind of like forced to, come on, you have to push to that the money comes in time. We have to work with contracts, even though contracts would not be really used, and so on. So they were forced to do that. And if they wouldn't follow that ideas, then they were not being, their meanings were not taken into consideration. This might be also something to do with Yusuf, because he was always kind of like pushing a little bit for promotion, and probably this was not the right way to do it in a Danish context. So you will be seen at some point if you show the right efforts, but he was actually pushing for that. Yeah. So possible explanations, just to be very, very brief, because I don't have time any longer, is it has to do with this, yeah, wielding the reality. It's as I said, symbolic violence, and here is kind of like the conclusion for that. So why one could say, like, okay, maybe Yusuf decided to leave the company because he didn't have the right cultural capital, right? So he didn't have the right educational background, because his background was from Germany and not from Denmark. And Denmark valued their education much higher than other education. So that was kind of naturalized. So the best education to have is a business education from Denmark, and all the others are not really kind of as valid as the Danish one. And that might be a cultural capital issue. But on the other hand, actually it's based more on symbolic capital, because this whole thinking of that the Danish education system is better was constantly referred to from headquarters by, for example, having the sales course, and also having the sales course facilitated by somebody from a Danish business school who never had been to the ethnic market before and didn't know how the rules were there. So actually what happens through the symbolic violence, there was a stereotypization, a naturalization of what it means to be Turkish. And that's why they also got stuck there. So actually their cultural capital yeah, they were used kind of like this utilizing. So their social capital, or their networks and their cultural capital, were used for the profit of the Danish company. And in that sense, actually, the Danish company, even though they said we are very welcoming and open, they sustained this inequality regimes, because they never actually accepted their Turkish salespeople on par with the Danish ethnic majority. Yeah, and that's it.